All right, Peter King, NBC Sports, Football Morning in America, journalism legend. He's about to fly to the West Coast on Thanksgiving week. What's your Thanksgiving tradition? Like, what's your number one power ranking? I need to have it on Thanksgiving situation.
Kevin, it's my favorite holiday of the year. And I've never once worked on Thanksgiving in my life. Never. And there's a reason that, when I was growing up, my family made a big deal out of Thanksgiving in Connecticut. So when I got married, our family made a big deal out of Thanksgiving. So every year we gather in one spot. I have a daughter and her family who live in Seattle, another daughter and her family live in Berkeley, and we live here. So we are the ones who fly the 6 hours and go to Seattle. And we will have a fantastic smoked turkey made by my son-in-law, Nick. And the only thing I really, really care about is the cranberries have to be quality.
Of course.
I can't have canned cranberries. If that happens, there's going to be big trouble. So right. Otherwise, you can do whatever you want on Thanksgiving. Everybody always makes a good turkey. I love turkey. But if you F up the cranberries, I will be pissed off. Anyway.
You've thrown down the gauntlet for any family member. It's over.
Which the cranberries I've said on many occasions.
The standard is the standard with the cranberries, as Mike Tomlin would say.
The standard is the standard, said Coach Tomlin.
Exactly. No excuses here. Peter, so on Monday night, it was one of the most interesting games of the season.
It really was.
Because we saw the limits of the Mahomes' ability to get literally the ball in the hands of a receiver down the field for a touchdown, and the wide receiver MVS could not bring it in. We saw the limits about what happens if Travis Kelce's not 100% in that offense. But on the flip side, there's a defense that causes havoc all the time. It's the best defense that the Mahomes has ever had at the NFL level. You know Mahomes well. You went to Germany with them a couple of weeks ago, and you talked to them about it. Level of concern. I think Mahomes has reached the point for me where I will just give him the benefit of the doubt. They'll figure it out. They'll figure out the offense by January. But playing a game like that and going 3 straight games without a second half point, is there an actual level of concern for you?
I'm going to answer that with a 2-letter word, but I'm going to have a qualifier to it. And I would say no. Mm-hmm. And the reason is that if Marquez Valdes-Scantling had caught an eminently catchable, beautiful throw by Mahomes, or either if Travis Kelce doesn't very uncharacteristically get a ball punched out of his hands. But if either of those things is reversed, Kansas City wins the game. And what we're talking about this morning is, man, tough win, 24-21. But Kansas City won a game they had to win. The worrisome thing for me is that the margin of error continues for them to be so incredibly small. Okay. 2 games ago, they scored 9 points in basically a no-show game. You figure almost every team has almost one incredible clunker that you just say, hey, let's bury that one. Mahomes was sick, road game before they go to Germany. Who knows if their minds are totally on the bad Denver Broncos? I don't know. But you tend to put that one in the rear view. But then they go and they only score 14 points against offensive points against Miami in Germany. And in fact, in the last 55 minutes of the game, 55 minutes, they score 1 touchdown. So now I'm at that game. And after the game, Andy Reid, I'm waiting to talk to Andy Reid in his little office at Deutsche Bank Park in Frankfurt. And PR guy says, hey, wait over here. So I waited and I waited and I waited 17 minutes. Now, I did a couple of other things while I was waiting, but I kept looking at the door. And you know who was in there was, the offensive coordinator. It was Andy basically, talking at that time, trying to find some solutions and trying to figure it out. And when the door opened, and all of a sudden I could walk in there, I really sensed that Andy truly felt, listen, Rashee Rice, Sky Moore, they're going to figure it out. They're getting better. They're the way our defense was last year. We struggled some on defense. We were so young. I'm really not worried about this. And so in this game, Rashee Rice and Sky Moore, who were basically going to be their young downfield threats, give them 5 catches for 46 yards, and it's just not good enough. And I think the way I look at their offense right now, Kevin, is, Patrick Mahomes cannot make mistakes. He cannot throw that ball maybe 2 yards short in the end zone to have it intercepted by Kevin Byard. He just can't make those mistakes. That's why I say I'm not worried, but there's an asterisk. And the asterisk is their margin for error now is so small.
The onus is on Mahomes to figure it out is the best possible pathway forward, because for the next 5 years, the most important thing is they have a young, talented defense that is going to keep them.
Yes.
This is going to keep them removing the best quarterback in football. They're always going to have a good defense, it looks like, for at least the next 3-4 years because of the youth on it, the way they've drafted, the way that Spags has just drawn it up if he doesn't get a head coaching job. So then all you need to do is have the best quarterback in football, solve a couple things. That's a pretty good equation to me. That's a nice problem to have. That's a champagne problem to have. That's why I don't have a huge level of concern in the long term, certainly. But maybe the next couple of weeks there could be some things to iron out. I want to talk about the Jets real quick. Go to Tim Boyle. And my feeling is that once Aaron Rodgers goes down, you could still make the playoffs. You see the defense here.
Yeah.
That I think, you look at a team like the Browns, and the Browns defense is statistically better than the Jets, but it's still the same genre of team where they are able to wreak havoc, stay in games, and they're going to make the playoffs. You look at a team like the damn Broncos, who are now, I think, like 20% chance of making the playoffs just because there just aren't a lot of credible AFC teams. Your thoughts on I guess we'll just call it the Zach Wilson saga over the past couple of months. It just seemed to have been the sign of a franchise that was just frankly a little bit lost, and not really decisive on what this was supposed to look like after Rodgers went down.
I think one of the things that Robert Saleh said, and I had talked to him once during this year, and they wanted Zach Wilson to succeed so much. They were intent on going too far, in my opinion, to help him succeed. And especially after the Kansas City game on that night in early October, where he threw 2 touchdowns and looked very, very good. He didn't get sacked much. I forget what his numbers were, but he's gotten sacked a lot this year, obviously. But he avoided that and played well. And that bought him a month, basically. It bought him a month. And I think the other problem with the Jets is that they felt like if they were going to yank Zach Wilson, that it was over for Zach Wilson. They wanted this to be a redshirt year, and they wanted him to learn behind the master. Yeah. And yes, Jordan Love. I mean, everybody can have whatever opinion they want out of Aaron Rodgers, but he's a damn good mentor. And, and I think that's the thing that Robert Saleh and Joe Douglas wanted. But the fact is, over and over again, and I documented it, in his last 65 possessions as the quarterback of the New York Jets, 65, going back 5 1/3 games. So almost exactly 1/3 of the season. Okay. He had, in these 65 drives, he had 3 touchdowns. And one of them was the laydown touchdown by the Eagles. And so you can't keep doing it. I thought Salah went too far anyway. I would have yanked him. I certainly would have yanked him after the Charger game. Absolutely would have yanked him after the interception he threw in Vegas. At some point, you have to just look at this and you have to say, it's not going to work. Every good intention that we have, it's wonderful, but it's not going to work. And we got to move on, and we don't care if the janitor plays.
So I saw you were in Detroit to lead your column with the Lions and golf and that comeback on Sunday. I'm not asking this because I want to pump up Detroit. You don't have to answer Detroit. But
no, I love Detroit. I love Detroit.
No, me too. But when I ask the question, you're going to know why I'm broadening this. I feel like no one knows how good of a football town Detroit can be and how much they love football there. And I'm curious, and you've been to every single football town. You've been there at every football town's peak. And what I mean by that is championship games. I remember going up to Seattle before the Richard Sherman game, right? The 2014 game, and just everybody in the streets and before the game and just having a beer and just you're thinking this is the peak of Seattle football, hometown NFC title game. Obviously they won the game, but there's such a buzz. I'm curious where you put Detroit when it's rolling among football towns in America, and who else is in that mix?
Well, before I rank them, I'm going to tell you one story. Late in Bill Parcells' coaching career, when I was talking to him about places that he thinks are great jobs in the NFL, you think maybe he'll say Green Bay, even though they were so down at the time. Who I didn't know. Maybe he'd say Philly. I don't know. First one he said was the Detroit Lions. And that's because not necessarily when Bill Parcells was a kid, but honestly, when he was a kid, late 50s, growing up in Jersey, Bill Parcells, late 50s, the Detroit Lions were a power franchise. They owned Paul Brown for a few years, and that was the gold standard in the NFL. So I think I would preface it by saying that. And you know what I look at, honestly, Kevin? I look at how teams travel. And this year, you've seen what's happened when the Detroit Lions travel. Look, everybody travels to L.A., and everybody looks good in L.A. because there isn't that, long, old, generated fan base for a team like the Chargers. But so that's one. But you look at the other road games they played this year, and you just basically say this is a team that is beloved by the locals, and if they're ever good, watch out. And so I agree with you. I think there's one reason if there were empty seats when the Lions were bad on Thanksgiving in the 90s, and there were a few empty seats, but not many. If there were a lot of empty seats, they would have taken away that Thanksgiving tradition because it just wasn't going to look good. And they don't want to have a crap team in one of their big TV windows of the year. But the NFL, look, I was covering these league meetings when there were teams trying to get the Thanksgiving game away from the Lions. Why should they have this privilege? Why? And the league said, we're never going to take it. The tradition is too good. And now that I think I wrote this week that there's something like 5-18 in their last 23 at home on Thanksgiving. But now, the wheels are turning and they're going to be really good at home, I think, from here on out.
It's funny you mentioned Parcells because Parcells obviously is Dan Campbell's mentor of sorts. He worked under him. He played under him. And when I was with Dan Campbell a couple of years ago, when he first took the job, Campbell's vision was if you could ever win in Detroit, you could unlock a mania unlike anything we've ever seen in football. If you could get to Detroit and win, it would be unbelievable. And I mean, and Dan, he bleeds Detroit at this point. Like he the phrase he used with me was, it's like Texas where he's from, but with different accents. And he got actually emotional talking about like the auto collapse and the housing market. Like he just loves Detroit. It just feels very special to me. And I think that's I don't think we get that. I mean, we had that with the Bills a couple of years ago, where it's almost the resurrection of a franchise and needed it so badly. But I just think it's one of the best stories in football. I want to flip to one of the grimmest stories in football right now, which is the Patriots. You know that franchise really well. I don't know what's going to happen. We just have it's uncharted waters for me because I'm younger than you. You've seen Don Shula cycle out of the sport. You've seen and even before that, Tom Landry get unceremoniously fired by Jerry Jones and replaced by Jimmy Johnson. We've seen these sort of deans of the sport, these icons, be pushed out. Belichick to me is the greatest coach of all time, but that doesn't earn you very much when you're 2-8 and look hopeless. This plays out how, Peter?
Oh, I think most likely, the ironic thing about this whole story, Kevin, is that everybody knew. Tom Brady even told me when he was, I don't know, 30, 34 years old, I'll basically, and I'm paraphrasing, I'll be like all the rest of them when Belichick is done with me, I'll be gone. And you think how silly that sounds when a guy who's 32 years old and has 3 Super Bowl rings. Oh, you're crazy. He's not going to do that to you. But he did it, in essence. Kraft would have kept Brady until he was 89 years old. Now Kraft might do the same thing to Belichick.
Yep.
And I think it'll look nice and it'll sound nice. But I think, make no mistake about it, that if the Patriots continue down this track, there's no reason to think that they won't end up with the 3rd, 5th, 6th pick in the draft. And it's going to be a very high pick with a bad record, with 4-13 or whatever it is. There's going to be a very nice ceremony. They'll part ways. Kraft will pay him $50 million or whatever he has left on his contract. That won't be an issue. It never has been an issue, even though about the stories earlier in the year where he's got a contract extension. Kraft doesn't care. I mean, how much longer does he have? He's 82 years old.
Mm-hmm.
He wants to find some way to win right now. And I think Robert Kraft, this is my gut feeling. I've not talked to him about it, but this is my gut feeling on Kraft. He wants to modernize this franchise. He does not want a poobah with this franchise who makes every decision, because it has gone totally off the rails, because Parcells' drafts have been horrible, capital H. And so you have to look at this now and you have to say, okay, what's he going to do? In my opinion, he's going to look for an offensive-minded coach who can groom a quarterback fairly soon, probably not Mac Jones, but we'll see. And then he's probably, I think he'll hire a general manager. And so we'll see what happens. But I think the end with Belichick probably comes this year in January, and there's a very nice ceremony and all that. And I think Belichick understands there's no sense in making this ugly at the end. And that's how I see it ending.
Let's flip this. My feeling is that Belichick has unfortunately made the Patriots a less desirable job, which I didn't think was possible, and that Belichick has made himself a less desirable candidate for a team like the Commanders, for a team potentially like the Panthers. But at the NFL ownership ranks well. Is there going to be a demand if Belichick wants to keep doing this?
I think so. Demand might be strong. Like, I would be very careful in this because, look, Belichick, I think I'm right in saying this, on opening day, when he coaches in 2024, will be 72 years old. We can say everything we want about, man, this guy looks 58, whatever. And he does. He has taken very good care of himself. He has a great getaway out on Nantucket where he can just disappear and decompress. But, the real key thing is what Chris Sims told me a couple of years ago, is that the reason that Bill Belichick can stand on the sidelines and look like he's walking out to get the newspaper on a Tuesday morning in May. And that's an old statement if there ever was. But the reason he can do that is that he doesn't get all tight. He's been around football since his father started letting him into the Navy meetings at the Naval Academy. This is how crazy this sounds. This is pre-Roger Staubach at the Naval Academy, when Bill Belichick started in on the meetings where his dad, who was an assistant coach and also the advanced scout for Navy, would brief his team on all of these upcoming opponents that they were going to play. Right. Bill would just sit there. But look, Bill is going to have, I believe, is going to have a job if he wants one. And in my opinion, I won't be surprised. I mean, what if Dallas crashes to earth, Kevin? What does Jerry Jones do? He repeats history, and maybe he just inquires about Belichick. Who knows? We'll see. What do the Chargers do? Chargers may not be able to afford very much, but I think they would definitely have interest. David Tepper would be starstruck if he fires Frank Reich, and obviously Washington would look into him. It'd be a cool regional hire, but I think he'll get a job if he wants one.
Tickets to the game, merch, meals at iconic restaurants, stays at Caesar's Palace. All this can be yours when you bet with Caesars Sportsbook. Win or lose, every bet earns reward credits, which you can redeem across the empire. Now, if you haven't started yet, use the code OMAHAFULL and then place your first bet up to $1,250. If you win, great, you keep those winnings. But if you lose, you get your stake back as a bonus bet.
We're going to do a thing called Badasses, which is the most badass person you've ever been around. You've been around so many people. You mentioned Parcells. Obviously, you were on those Giants teams that were full of badasses in the 80s, throughout the 90s. And also, like, modern football is full of badasses. There's people right now, like Jalen Carter tried to intercept a damn spiked pass yesterday, which might have been based off of something you saw on this show with Dominic Foxworth's whole story about Ed Reed trying to do it. So you have the floor. You can take a minute to think about it if you need it. Tell me about the most badass person you've ever seen in football, Peter King.
I hate to be cliche, but I'm going to say Lawrence Taylor.
Okay.
I covered him for 4 years. I mean, Lawrence Taylor was the kind of guy underneath Giant Stadium in the old days was a very small concourse, a one-lane concourse around so that they can get the machinery in and out of the stadium and all that stuff. And Lawrence Taylor one time was driving about 50 miles an hour through there. And I mean, he missed 2 or 3 of us by 18 inches, standing by the side, because we look over and we say, holy crap, Lawrence Taylor is driving very fast in the concourse right outside the Giants locker room. I would say that, he was a guy who, when he wanted to do something, he played with a torn pectoral and got 2 sacks once at New Orleans. I honestly, Kevin, this is a terrible thing to say, but I'm a little surprised he's still alive. This is a guy who lived every day of his life on the edge. So I would probably say Lawrence Taylor. And I'm sorry for being cliche.
No, I would. If Bill Belichick were on this show, he'd say the same thing.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say Kevin Gogan. I had a confrontation with him one time. I was going to say James Harrison, who even to this day, if I ever see him, he scares the crap out of me. But I think I would say Taylor.
Wait, can we get the Gogan interaction?
Oh, I called him a journeyman in one of my stories when he was with the 49ers. And I think at that moment, he had played for 3 teams in 5 years, which is
sure. And
I may be wrong about that. Journeyman. I'd have to look it up. But to me, it defines journeyman. So I walked in the 49ers locker room back in the Steve Young days, and he saw me and he goes, journeyman. And he screams at the top of his lungs, I'm no effing journeyman. And, because he viewed it as a terrible thing, like a bum. And I said, it's not a bad word. I mean, it's just you are a journeyman. And anyway, so a couple of guys stepped between us. And later he saw me and he just laughed. He goes, "Hey, I got you, didn't I?" And but anyway, that was an interesting moment.
And then James Harrison, just a scary dude. You didn't have any.
I mean, he had this look in his eye. I remember one time in training camp when Antonio Brown was a rookie and Mike Tomlin put Antonio Brown back to catch a punt, and James Harrison was the gunner on the punt team, which he never was. But Tomlin wanted to scare the living crap out of Antonio Brown. And James Harrison was running like a 4.3 40 down right at Antonio Brown. And Antonio Brown just like melted into this little mass of dough, and he fumbled and everything. And Tomlin was laughing. Harrison was laughing. Everything was laughing. And Tomlin said later, "I want to get this guy ready to return punts." And what better way do you get a guy ready to return punts than have James Harrison running at you 100 miles an hour? And so that was Harrison to me anyway.
One thing I loved about Harrison is in Latrobe, he would have these customized everyone has their own, the veterans had their golf carts, and he would always have these really exotic painted golf carts, like I think it was the Lakers logo was on it, tons of different stuff. And he would just see him and he'd be the most menacing guy. And then he'd be driving around in this purple Lakers golf cart. I just loved. And I just love that whole vibe in Latrobe. I feel like you just learn so much about football, Peter, because you're just in it all the time and you're seeing these guys. I just wish
Kevin, I got to tell you a quick Latrobe story.
Yeah.
In 85, might have been 84. I was covering the Bengals, but in those days, they let me at the Cincinnati Enquirer go to the other training camps in the division for a day because I wanted to get to know the other teams. So I went up to Pittsburgh I went up to Latrobe, and Joe Gordon, who was the PR guy, said, "Well, who do you want to talk to?" And so I gave him a list. And so Joe Gordon just gives me their room numbers over in the dorm, and he says, "Just go and knock on their doors." And, and one of them was Mike Webster. And I must have sat in Mike Webster's room for 45 minutes and talked about the team. And he didn't want me to go. He was happy just sitting there talking about his team and his career and all that stuff. And to me, it's one of the reasons why, this is the 40th year I've done it. And it's one of the reasons why I have every year, unless something really weird happens, I will be in Latrobe.
Yep.
Just because it's the perfect place to go to training camp.
Yep. Access, by the way, if you're not familiar with it, it's still like that. We just go to their dorm rooms and they talk to us. Peter King, thank you so much.
You spent an hour with Kenny Pickett.
That's exactly right.
Feet on the bed, everything. I know.
They just say, "Here you go, man. Just knock on the door. He'll be happy to see you." That's exactly how NFL Access works. Peter King, thank you so much. Read them, Football Morning America. Enjoy the cranberries on Thanksgiving, buddy.
All right. Hey, listen, Kevin, great to be on with you. Good luck. You're doing a great job.
Thanks, man. I appreciate that so much.